Thank you, Carol, for that beautiful, beautiful message and song. Truly, he does love us. Hey, we're glad you're here today. We welcome you to our services. What a difference a week makes in the weather, huh? You know, I'm not in management, as you well know. If I were, I would have had that snowstorm come this weekend when we lose an hour's sleep. Well, you know, I mean, I just don't know, you know, the timing of that. But anyway, I'm really glad to be here, and I hope you are today as well. We continue our series this year looking at characters in the Bible. And from Christmas to Easter, we're looking at the life of Jesus because he's the perfect example, the one we are called to follow. Today we pick it up in the Gospel of John. If you have your Bibles, you can open them, or a lot of the scripture will be on the PowerPoint when we get to it. I'd like to read some verses that are not on the PowerPoint that introduces the passage to us. We're in John chapter 5. John chapter 5. And we're going to talk today about how your life is not about your circumstances. It's about your choice. We're going to talk about some choices you'll make that will literally affect everything. John chapter 5, beginning with verse 1. Sometime later, Jesus went up to Jerusalem for a feast of the Jews. Now, there is in Jerusalem, near the sheep gate, a pool, which is in Aramaic is called Bethesda, and which is surrounded by 5 covered colonnades. Same thing as 5 covered porches. The sheep gate was the gate through which, of course, the sheep would be brought into the temple to be slaughtered, to be offered up as sacrifices. And so it was at this point that we pick it up that Jesus is coming in, and here's what is happening. It says in verse 3, "Here a great number of disabled people used to lie, the blind, the lame, the paralyzed." Wouldn't that be a horrible, horrible scene? Every day, the people that come to this point come and they're just totally disabled. Now, some translations leave out and some translations put in, because it's not until you get to the older manuscripts that you find that it says they would gather there because at the pool there were certain times they believed an angel of the Lord would come down and stir the waters, and it was like a jacuzzi effect perhaps, and the first one to get in would be healed. Now that has presented some problems. Number one, if that were true, okay, if that were true, it doesn't do much for the character of God. What's it say? The healthiest people get healed first, while the others never get healed. Isn't that true? I mean, the one who needs it the most, they're going to be the last ones to get into the pool. They're never going to get healed. Am I right? It's the person who says, hey, I'm bad, but I'm not as bad as the others. I can jump in the pool first. I'll be healed. There's just no indication of this. It seems to be, though, it was like a legend. Maybe someday somebody said, hey, look, and somebody stepped to say, I feel a whole lot better. And they thought, hey, that must be an angel of God. So more than anything else, it's probably a tradition. A tradition. And this is a horrible situation with these people gathering here. Can you imagine the conversations? How's your back this morning, Ezra? Terrible, terrible. I could barely roll over and get out of bed this morning. How are you doing, Eli? Eli says, I wish I could roll over. My legs are totally useless. They're like stones. Third guy replies, you two have it Good. He says, nothing in my body moves. My whole body doesn't function. Nothing works. One of them quirks back, well, your mouth seems to be working pretty well this morning. You know, and can you imagine how negative and back and forth trying to top the other person? My sickness is worse than yours. If you ever get caught up in those conversations, you know what you want to do? Grab your hat and run, don't you? Forget your hat, just run. You know, they're not fun conversations. I think that's pretty much what was happening here. Now, we pick it up with verse 5 and 6. And now, this goes on the PowerPoint here behind me. It says, one who had been an invalid for 38 years. Folks, that's a long time. A long time. 38 years. When Jesus saw him lying there and learned that he'd been in this condition for a long time, he asked him, do you want to get well? Now, come on, Jesus. Isn't that about the dumbest question anyone could ask? You see a sick person there. The guy can't move. And Jesus says, do you want to get well? Well, hello there. Of course, it's like asking a starving man, would you really like some food? It's like asking a drowning man in the middle of the ocean, would you really like for me to throw you a life raft? Hello, anybody home? Do you want to get well? No, Jesus never asked dumb questions. He got some dumb answers sometimes, but he never asked a dumb question. Jesus asked it because he knew it was a very valid question. And your response to that question he's asking you and I today will determine our future. Don't tell me, well, I hope this year's a good year, or next year's a good year for me. No. Question is, do you and I really want to get well? It's a valid question because Jesus is telling this man, you know, right now, you get handouts. You have somebody who brings you here every day. You have somebody that picks you up after they get done working and takes you back home. And they put you back in bed because you can't move. And they're just waiting on you. And they are serving you. And if I heal you, your life's going to change. You may have to start realizing there's a 4 a.m. on the alarm clock. And you may have to go out and go to work. And you may have to do a job you really don't find pleasant and enjoyable. You realize with healing comes responsibility. And there's a lot of people say, you know, thanks, Jesus, but I think I'll just continue to hang out here. It's really not that bad. You see, there's always a cost to healing, isn't there? Yeah. We want to be healed, but then we don't want the responsibility that comes to it. Let me ask you, what question is he asking you today? Do you want to get well? Maybe it's physical. Maybe it's spiritual. Do you say, oh, dear God, I just want to grow and I want to be a great servant of yours. Do you really? You can be. There's a cost involved. There's responsibility that comes with healing. Or you can just sit back and be a spiritual ignoramus. The choice is yours. You see, it's all about our choice to that very legitimate question Jesus poses to you and I. Do we really want to get well? And where I really want to take this today is, I think he asks you and I, do we really want this church to grow? I'm not going to ask you to raise your hand, because if you say, oh, of course I want this church to grow, if you if you're sitting there saying, I do, it is going to require a change on your part. There's going to come responsibility for God to heal a church and for God to bless a church. And do you say, I really want this church to grow? Well, you're probably going to have to change. And I'm probably going to have to change. Are we really ready for that? That's what Jesus says when he poses that question. Now, as we break it down, we just have twofold. We're just two major points. We have some subpoints under them. But you're either living cowardly today or you're living courageously today. Just one of the two. You're either living as a coward or you're living with courage. The choice is yours. Let's begin as we see today. Here's where we go first off. Cowardly living always results in people choosing blame over responsibility. Remember the question? What was it? Do you want to get well? You can repeat that with me if you want to. All right. Chooses blame over responsibility. The question was, do you want to get well? What would be your answer? Sign me up. Yes, 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 yes. You'd scream it. How many times? Sir, the invalid replied, I have no one to help me into the pool. When the water is stirred while I'm trying to get in, someone else goes down ahead of me. Are you like me, or is it just me? I'm scratching my head saying, what's that have to do with the price of eggs in China? Did Jesus say, why haven't you gotten into the water? That's not the question. The question is, do you want to get well? Oh, sir, I have no one to help me. This guy, more than his legs were paralyzed, his whole life was paralyzed. He lost the expectation that life could be different and it could be better and it could be healed. He'd given up. I'm just amazed. Blame someone else. And what we're going to see here is the fact that Jesus confronts all of us. Even people in situations that are unpleasant and maybe a situation where you think, hey, it gives me a pass. It doesn't give anybody a pass today. Do you want to get well? Your circumstances may not change. There may not be physical healing. But there can be more important healing taking place in your life and in mine. This blame game, it goes all the way back to Adam and Eve. We saw it in the studies we're doing on Sunday night. We're doing Bob Russell's study of the first few chapters of Genesis. And, God comes to Adam and he said, did you eat of that tree? And he says, the woman you gave me, she gave it to me and I ate. What's he saying? God, I'm blaming this woman, and ultimately I'm blaming you, God. It's your fault. If you hadn't given me this cotton-picking woman, if you had picked out a better mate for me, you're the one who picked her out for me, God. It's really your fault. Pretty brazen of Adam. No responsibility. It's Eve's fault. It's your fault, God. Moses comes down from the mountain and he sees they made a golden calf. He said, what's going here? Aaron says, I couldn't help it. The people brought me their jewelry and I threw it to the fire and I walked a golden calf. Really? You think you've heard it all from your kids? Can you imagine Moses and God saying, blame the fire, blame the calf, blame the jewelry, blame the people. But for goodness sakes, don't take responsibility. And we do the same today. I quit drinking, but my wife constantly nags me. I make better grades in school, but teacher doesn't like me. I go to church, but my mom and dad made me go when I was little. Blame the parents, blame the school, blame the spouse. Let me ask you again, do you really want to get well? Do you really want to get well spiritually? Do you really want to have healthy relationships in your marriage? Do you really want to be well? Then you have to assume some responsibility and some changes. Do you really want to have healthy relationships with your extended family, with your parents, with your children and grandchildren, and with your neighbors and people at work? Do you really want, or do you just want to alienate people and just continue to excuse your cynical, sarcastic, demeaning behavior? Choice is yours. And the choice you make is going to affect everything. Wow. It only gets worse. Secondly, there's a second subpoint under here. We choose comfort over commitment. Do we want to get well? Well, I don't know. It's kind of comfortable, even in this horrible situation. I mean, I think it'd be terrible not be able to walk in that. But, you know, we know that. And like I said, there's some people that get kind of addicted to it. I remember after my colon surgery, I'd never been sick a day in my life except for the flu or stuff like that, but never been in the hospital, never had colon surgery, major surgery. Man, I tell you, when I got home, I couldn't get in bed, I couldn't get out of bed without help. I couldn't get in my chair without help. I couldn't get out of my chair without help. I mean, I literally was an invalid. And it had its advantages. Sweetheart, can you give me the remote control? Thank you. Okay. Honey, I'd like a glass of iced tea, too. Okay. Do you mind making me some popcorn while I watch this movie? Sure. I got to liking that. Because I knew the moment I was well, get it yourself. Who was your slave this time yesterday, you know? And if you can get up and walk, you get up and you get the remote yourself. You make the popcorn yourself. And so sometimes we choose comfort with a paralysis because we just don't like commitment. I don't want to have to get up at 4 o'clock every morning and go to work. I don't want to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, go to work when it's dark, and come home when it's dark. I don't want to have to get up at 3:30 some mornings, go to work because the roads are so bad and icy and snowy to get there on time so I won't be late for work. I don't like working with people that I don't like being around. So easy to choose the comfort of paralysis. That's cowardly living. I kind of like it right where I'm at, rather than a life that is committed. And you're going to make that choice today, whether you want comfort or whether you want commitment as we move on. Well, we quickly got to move on. I don't want to spend all of our time talking about the paralysis of living cowardly. I want to spend most of our time on the power of living courageously. The power of living courageously. Here we go. Number one, obedience. This is the true freedom experience. Then Jesus said to him, "Get up, pick up your mat, and walk." At once the man was cured. He picked up his mat and walked. I don't know what got into this guy. He changed. If I'd been Jesus, I'd say, you can tell him this guy isn't going to do anything. What would you have done if you were the paralyzed guy? You said, I would have gotten up, picked up my mat, and walked. Really? Or would you have said, Jesus, you don't understand. I haven't walked in 38 years. Help me. Let's see. We'll try. Let's see if I can stand. Well, Jesus, if you don't help me, you know what might happen? What? I might fall down. And I could hurt myself even more. Really? I guess you could. And it would be so embarrassing. Oh, we don't like to be scene makers, do we? And that's why we like comfort over commitment that we just talked about. We like comfort over obedience because God's going to call us to do things that they're really risky. And it's scary. And we might even fail. I have here somewhere, this book by Jeff Walling, one of my favorite preachers. Great guy. I've heard him speak to the North American several times. And just an incredible preacher. And he tells a story. It's not about himself. It's about another guy that he came across this story. And I want to read this to you. It's a story about a guy, I don't know, named Rick. True story, though. When Rick was in junior high, he tells, this is what happened to him. He always, Mark, wanted to play in the jazz band. Yeah. It didn't go so hot, though. Evidently, his teacher wasn't as good as you are. But anyhow, here's what happens. Being chosen to play third trumpet in the Bakersfield All-City Jazz Orchestra was an honor. Most of the other kids were older, and they'd been playing jazz for quite a while. Oh, I felt so cool that first day as I found my chair. I sat down, began warming up my mouthpiece and thinking about the summer ahead. The music we were to play was all jazz, no classics allowed. We were even scheduled to do a full-blown big band concert in the city auditorium in August. Oh, this is going to be the best summer of my life. Just then, Jack Miner walked to the band leader's stand. He was the new jazz band teacher from the high school. He was sharp, he was young, he was single. He was the definition of hip. He stepped to the podium and got right to it. I know you're here to play jazz, so we're not going to waste your time talking. Let's start with chart number 6. Trumpets will take the ad-lib solos. About this fast he went. A 1, a 2, and a 3, and a 4, and we were off. He was snapping his fingers in rhythm with one hand and punching the air with the other on the off beats. He looked like something straight out of the big band era. The band sounded great. My third trumpet part was fairly easy, just straight eighth notes. So I played it with gusto. This was the life I'd always imagined. And Mr. Miner was now Doc Severin's son, and I was the star trumpeter. And I just knew I looked cool swinging my horn as I hit those offbeat eighth notes. But then halfway through the second page, Mr. Miner pointed to the first chair trumpet, and the whole band quit playing while he stood and began a solo. I listened, enraptured, to the wild music he was making. But when I looked for it on the page, all I found were 2 Latin words, ad lib. Mr. Miner was grinning and saying, "Yeah, man, go," and bouncing along with the beat. I nudged the second chair trumpeter. "Hey, where's he getting the music?" "He made it up. That's ad-libbing." "Wow, ad-libbing, that's pretty cool. How long did it take him to do that?" I just shrugged his shoulders. But before I could ask another question, another section was finished, and Mr. Miner was pointing at second chair trumpeter. He stood and he began to wail his own solo. I'm sure his ad-libbing was as hot as the first chair's had been, but I'm going to confess, I don't remember it. I began to sweat like it was 120. Sweat just poured off my brow. My palms were soaked. My lips had gone numb. Every time Mr. Miner said, "Go, man, go," my heart skipped 3 beats. I was naive and even unprepared, but I could at least count, for goodness sakes. Third chair would be next. That's me. No way was I going to be able to do that. Not in front of all these people. But the band just kept playing. I had nowhere to run. 4 measures, my life would be over. 3, 2, 1. Mr. Miner pointed at me. My legs froze. I couldn't stand. My teeth were locked behind my mouthpiece. It was all I could do just to stay conscious and not pass out. Every eye turned toward me, and then somehow I stood and played. Well, no, but I tried to play. What? Excuse me. This is so funny to me. It may not be funny to you, but this is hilarious. What came out were 3 short bleeps and blurps, and then 1 high bleep. The last note sounded like a cross between a bad kazoo and a sick llama. Needless to say, I never got a, yeah, man, go, man, go. He just shook his head and counted the band back into the last refrain of the tune. I sat down, took the mouthpiece from my trumpet, packed them in the case, and then as the band was playing, I quietly slipped out of rehearsal. I would never again play in Bakersfield All-City Jazz Band. Oh, don't you want to cry for that young man? Man, I do. I'm not laughing at him. You know why I'm laughing? Because I have been there. I have been there. Not playing in the jazz band. I got more sense than that. But I've been there. Now let me ask you the question again. Do you really want to get well? No. Not really. Because we know if Jesus says, obey me, rise up, take your mat and walk, do what you've never done before, I might fall flat on my face, Jesus. It's going to be really ugly. I don't want to make a scene. I could hurt myself. And that just paralyzes us. If you're going to grow spiritually, if you're going to get well, if whatever is ailing you today, if you want God's blessings upon it, you just need to start obeying. That's the true freedom experience. Just do what he says. Scary. I remember I had Professor Albert McGee that always said, he says, I'd rather try to do what God tells me to do and fall flat on my face in failure than to sit back and play it safe. Because when I stand before God, my failure will go down as a record. I had faith enough to try and obey God. Think about it. Whether you fail or succeed isn't up to you. You just obeyed God. You just do what you're supposed to do. Believe you me, the people from Washville know me well. I was the last person they would have ever picked to be a preacher. Isn't that right? Wasn't I shy and quiet? Am I right or am I exaggerating there? Come on, Washville, don't look to say, well, I don't know. Isn't that right? Yeah. I was as backward and as shy and as quiet, you know. And I just got up prepared to fail. I didn't get prepared to succeed. But it's amazing how that people can be gracious and put up with a big mess sometimes, you know. Choice is going to be yours, not mine, though. You're going to obey or not. We got to quickly move on. Secondly is repentance. God has been good to us, so let's stop sinning. Verse 14. Later, Jesus found him at the temple and said to him, see, you are well again. Stop sinning or something worse may happen to you. Now, I'm really puzzled by that. I wonder, Matt, was it the fact that this guy had sinned in the past and therefore had an accident and he was paralyzed? I don't know. It sounds like it, doesn't it? But maybe Jesus is saying, for the last 38 years, you have had a horrible attitude. You're healed. Your attitude better change. You better quit making excuses and blaming other people, and you better learn to take responsibility. Maybe that's what he's talking about now. I really don't know. But when Jesus heals us, he expects there to be a change in life. I think sometimes he really gets, God's patience is incredible. Don't you think he must get fed up with us as how we play games? Tony Campolo tells a true story. Years ago, he was invited to speak at this women's conference on World Day of Prayer. And he said right before he got up to speak, the president of the group, there were several hundred women there for the World Day of Prayer, whatever, got up and said, let's pray for a missionary in Venezuela. They need a hospital for children. There's so much sickness there, and they need $5,000 more, and they'll be able to build that hospital that will be able to help cure and heal sick children. she says, I'm going to ask Mr. Campolo if he won't lead us in prayer, praying that God will provide $5,000. Tony Campolo walked up to the podium and he said, this was a God thing. He says, I just stood there and thought for a moment and said, no. The women look at him like, no. He says, I'm not going to pray. He said, I think it'd be blasphemy. Doesn't God care about children in Venezuela? Yeah. He said, I tell you what. He took out his wallet. He says, I think God's already provided the money. Let's just take the cash we have on us today and let's just put it in the offering. He got the offering plate. He put in his cash. He says, one of those good days. He says, God is my witness. I only had $2.25. And he said, I looked at the president and I told her, he says, you're next. He says she gave him a dirty look, and then he realized why. She opened up her purse and put in $110 cash. He said, I don't know why I couldn't have married a woman like that. But he said, we got over $112. You're next. And they began passing around. He says, hey, I come from a black church. He's not black, but he said, I come from a black church. This is the way we do it. And he says, let's not ask God to provide something which he's already provided. And so they took up the offering. He said, I know some of the ladies that day held out just by the way they were looking and scowling. He said, but we managed to take up over $7,000. He said, why should we say, dear God, please help us provide $5,000? God said, I already got $7,000 pocket change for you guys. So let's quit playing games and let's change our attitude and let's step up and say we're responsible. And it always brings a change. Thirdly is vision. Vision. That's attempting something you've never done before. You know, it's like that junior high kid. Scary. You might fail. You might blow it. People might laugh at you and point their fingers. The only ones that laugh and point their fingers are the ones who play it safe and are cowards, and their life is totally nothing more than complete paralysis. Let them point their fingers and look at him or her. Because those are the ones God never uses. They never answer the call to come follow me. If you follow Jesus, you're going to fall on your face. You're going to get out of your comfort zone. You got to quit playing it safe. And it's going to change your life forever. Do you have a vision of what God really wants for you? Do you have a vision of what God wants for this church? Let's just quit making excuses. I want to play a video clip of Tony Melendez. He's a guy that was born without arms. No arms. Not one, neither one. And he wanted to play the guitar. And he does. Plays it with his feet. Goes around the country. The clip I'm playing is from a high school concert he did there at the auditorium. Hope you enjoy this clip of Tony Melendez.
And I learned to tune it to a different tuning. When I strum without touching the neck at all, it's a G chord. And that's how I'm able to make chords, because it's tuned to an open tuning, for those of you that know music. One of the first songs I ever learned how to play was a John Denver song. And this is called Grandma's Feather Bed. So I'd like to play that for you right now. It goes like this. When I was a little bit boy, just across the floor, and we used to go down at Grandpa's house, kiss that blue. That's your spot to get excited. That's your part to go, woo! Now you're the young people. I know you can give me one of the best woos I've ever heard. So let's see how well it goes. Here we go. Get ready. Here it comes. Get ready. Well, I'm on out. I'm a Harlem training grandpa too. I'm a big mom for the rest of my life.
Amazing, isn't it? Don't you think if you're the man that Jesus said healed, he would have said one of those, whoa! You know, man, I tell you, it's great. It's great when you say, I'm not going to choose to live a cowardly life anymore. I'm going to live by courage. Brings us to our last point, and that is connect to the one who heals you. You got to connect to the one who heals you. You know, I often wonder what happened to the people, and Jesus healed so many. Did their lives change? Did they go back living the life they lived before? Jesus always expects a complete reversal. And that's what he challenged this man with when he said, stop sinning. You know, your life's got to change. Otherwise, something worse is going to befall you. Meaning that there's worse things than go through this life disabled, and that's spend eternity in hell. You know, it's, as we get ready to wrap it up, it's this question that has haunted me now for several weeks. Do we really want to get well? Do we really want to get well? If you really want this church to grow, if you really want to grow spiritually, and then over the next few weeks, we're going to ask you to do things that maybe are uncomfortable for you. But I'm okay with that because I don't think it's too comfortable for Jesus hanging on that cross. So I really don't want to hear excuses. That's a coward's life. It just paralyzes. Churches don't grow, people don't grow, they stagnate. They just resort to the complaining. We're going to be asking you in the next few weeks, we're going to be presenting you with our, do it about every year, our sign-up sheets to get involved in ministry. Paul talked about the needs for cleaning. We have needs in nursery, we have needs in cleaning. We have so many areas, and it's all done through volunteers. People like yourself, not people sitting next to you or in front of you or behind you, but you. And we're going to ask you to step forward and say, I'm going to fill it out. And I'm going to commit for 1 year. Not for 2, 3, 4, 5 years, but for 1 year. Count me in. We're going to be challenging a lot of other areas. You know, if you really want this church to grow, there are some things you can do that you're not aware of, and I realize that, but I'm going to share them with you. When Sam and I were in Branson, we went one night to the Dixie Stampede. It was their first night to perform since Christmas. Branson's pretty much dead this time of the year. A lot of the shows not playing, but they'd come back as a packed house. And we had to park out in the back 40. And when we came out, it was freezing rain, you know, and it was cold and blustery. And Sam and I were holding hands. We're walking through the rain there. And I said, isn't it great that we didn't have to park up close? Because that would mean I was handicapped. I am so thrilled, honey. I get to hold your hand that much longer as we go back to the car, you know, slipping and sliding. That's why I park out in the North 40 every Sunday. I park in the cemetery if we have enough cars here of people to come to church. What are you willing to do? That's my parking place. Nobody's going to park where I park. Well, then I can predict the future of the church. The other 2 days we went to other shows, and there wasn't many people there. Both of those shows had probably 30, 40 people in places that would seat probably 1,500, I estimated them. Big theaters. But you know where the 30, 40 people sat? All in the back. If you believe that, I got some swamp land. I want to sell you right after church today, okay? They filled the rows. They tell you where to sit. They said, you're sitting here, you're sitting here, you're sitting there. I don't want in the middle. You sit there, every chair full for 3, 4 rows, and that was it. But the performance was incredible. Why'd they do that? To be mean to people? No. Folks, there's a lesson. Remember what Paul preached 2 weeks ago on that passage when Jesus said the children of the world are wiser in their generation than the children of light. Here's a great example. You go to the world, everybody wants the front seats, and they want to be connected. I have been to seminars, not even religious seminars. Sammy and I walk in, they got 2 rows of chairs. We say, nobody must have signed up for this thing, you know. And we sit down. It's a big room like this, maybe bigger. And pretty soon it fills up. And the more people come in, and they bring out chairs for a 3rd row. And when it's full, only when it's full, every chair, then they bring out the 4th row. Why do they do that? Just, wouldn't it be easier to just set up the chairs and whoever comes? No, they know where you sit makes a difference. Teachers say that makes a difference too. Am I right? I don't know. I'm not a teacher. But stats show it makes a difference. You may say, I do real well where I sit. I believe that. But if I'm a new person who's never been in church in my life and I come in, I'm watching this service from the back. And when I see people scattered out like marbles, not connected, not touching one another, I would tell myself, I'm not sure this is a place I want to come. That would have been my guess if I was a visitor. You say, wow, that's... Hey, I've had people tell me that. But I want to sit where I want to sit. Well, that's fine. You just answered the question, do you really want to get well, and do you really want to grow? What would happen if somebody comes in here, and there are every week, we have new people coming here, and they come in and they see all the back seats are empty and people are up here connected. What would happen? I guarantee you they'll want to come back because they'll say something is happening. I don't even know what it is, but something is happening there. But that's just a small thing. That's the easy part. You have a choice, like I said, to be in that comfort zone. I just sit back with my arms folded. Or to say, I want to be a part of the company of the committed. You know, one of my favorite groups of all times, it's not even more so than Elvis. Statler Brothers. I know you don't care for them. But Sam and I got to see them at the Fox several years ago. Used to watch them on Saturday night. They had their TV show. They had a great song, Count on Me. I'm going to play a clip of it. As we get ready to wrap it up today, I'm going to ask, can Christ count on you? Will you say, count me in? I'm going to sign. You can count. I'm going to be a part of the company of the committed. That's what we're going to ask you to do after we sing this song. We're going to wrap it up.